What is Huuda?
Why would you ask?
You've used the term before. It showed up in several of your books. It's something that's been thrown around here.
How does it show up in the books?
Yeah, it shows up as a term. I mean, the way I look at it is I mean, I feel like it has to do with your philosophy and your take and your experience, and what you've done with the sound, having to do with the music. When I think of the Huuda, I think of the sound, ensoundment. You call it. You use these terms.
Good. We all know what the Buddha is in our own way. We see statues of it. Right? We hear people talking about it. You see monks in robes chanting to it, offering obeisances to the Buddha. And so the Buddha is about enlightenment. Enlightenment and study, see. Reading. So the Buddha is relative to eyes, whereas the Huuda, as I call it, is relative to the ears. See, so you have the Buddha relative to the eyes, seeing and reading scripture and knowledge, to the brain, right, to awaken the brain, enlighten the brain. And in Huuda, it's more hearing into awakening the heart as fire sound. So it's a form of yoga, perhaps. Right.
How does what you call Huudism differ from Buddhism, if it does?
Well, they're similar. They're both forms of yoga, one emphasizing the eye and the brain for enlightenment, as in the case of Buddhism, among other things. And then the Huuda is really focusing more on the ear, sound, relative to the heart, so heart sound. See, and awakening by way of sound, see, and that implies sound and no sound. Yeah. So the Hu is something that I have accepted as the word for release, Hu exhalation. Right. Release, exhalation, and liberation of toxins from the brain, the body, the heart, and whatever. Yeah. So it's emphasizing the healing side of exhalation. And that means letting everything go. So everything is actually here, moving through the Hu-niverse of the cosmos and passing through us. So it's already gone and going and enabling us to breathe, because that's part of the breath of, let's say, the universe. Right? Beyond the fundamental identification of the organ of interest here, which is the ear and hearing and no hearing, sound and no sound, that brings in the topic of silence. So silence plays a very important part in this. So it's like hearing silence, but also hearing through and beyond silence, and then hearing the sound in silence. And then we're getting closer to the level of yogic sensitivity or perception. That is what the Huuda nature or the Huuda Dharma is about. It is a yoga, no doubt, because it's the ultra yoga of hearing, beyond hearing. And so that's relative to my kind of music, where it comes from. And so it goes.
Is your music a result of what you call Huuda?
Not a result. We can say it may be a coincidence with it because it pertains to the breath and the release of karma, the release of self, thought, mind, world, body, and so on. Everything that the universe may impose upon spirit souls. Those things are conditional things, and they come and they go. We are basically spirit, in essence. And in energy, we have spirit energy, living spirit energy. And we function as a body with perceptions. The eyes, the nose, ears, mouth, the touch, the flesh. And then we have all these other components inside us that more or less configure the complexity of what we call the human soul and the mind, and then even the spirit in a different way, which is animating the whole thing, giving us the power we need for all the parts and all the components, all the functions and all the levels that we are. So Buddhism is a way of entering and practicing silence to access enlightenment. Huuda is the opposite. It's not about silence, it's how you use sound. So it is a conscious and creative use or manipulation of sound. It's not mean ego manipulation, it's how we use sound or how we are used by sound. In order to heal ourselves, which is what the music is a healing for us. Not all reading and intellectual stuff is a healing thing. It's certainly related to healing and recognizing and comprehending and understanding to bring, peace to your mind. Understanding the deeper side. So we read, and then we listen. So we're reading and listening. Or in the Huudaism, you can listen and play at the same time. It's really about manifesting, not just taking it in and processing it for the enlightenment. It's really about learning and processing the expression, the exhalation of it, the radiance of it in sound. So sound radiance, heart fire, sound radiance.
So it has multiple. It sounds like it's doing more than one thing at once. Like it's clearing karma, but it's also coming from a place within the being of space, silence, having to do with all that.
And we know that in the case of Buddhism, it's about sitting quietly more than not, whereas you're attaining the same, in a sense, result differently when you're performing music. And that's why I have extended the, concept of performing music relative to the Huuda level to a state of meditation beyond what you hear, which is a rather unique demand. Can you play beyond what you hear? Can you play what you don't hear? Because we are as much a manifestation of silence and peace as we are sound and noise.
So it seems like in Buddhism that sound or music will both play a big part.
Oh, of course, yes. Well, silence is sound, and sound is silence when you hear them properly. Sound usually appears to emanate from silence, no sound, quietness. Then you have sound, and you say, well, I'm hearing the sound now, but what was it before it manifested? So Was it sound then, or what kind of sound was it? Or did it merge with the silence? So it obviously is born of the silence, or a deeper state where the sound is less audible. So it's more subtle. So it disappears, the sound disappears, all the sounds disappear, left to themselves. So they show up and fade out. So we're talking about the fade. Or Huuda is both. So the ever-fading, so the ever-sounding sort of truth of the inner sound, or the shabd, right, the sacred, spiritual sound, see, that sustains all sounds and silences altogether. See, it's the silence of sound and the sound of silence. See, and the exhalation, of course, as a physical expression of it. So it's the universe, because then you can go deeper and say, well, then the Huuda, if it's like the breath, right? It is the breath. It's life. It's life. So it disappears. It means it doesn't have a form. So at least the Buddha has a form. We have the form of Buddha. But the realization of Buddha nature is formlessness. So, it's emptiness. And that, in a way, reflects, in terms of Huudism, silence. And the different levels of silence and emptiness, or soundlessness, even better.
So then, would you compare it to some types of music or sound that is used by maybe certain Buddhist practitioners, such as chanting? Does it have similarities to that?
Those are calmer and more quieting forms of sound. But it doesn't mean they're any closer to Buddha, necessarily, or say it's more spiritual, necessarily. They're just calmer, closer to silence, and sort of like calmness. So the idea is a calmness. And then ultimately stillness. Right? But who's to say that a drum beat isn't both of those? See? A calm drum beat, boom, in the stillness of drum beat. See? Depends on who hears what and for what purpose. See? The native communication throughout the ages has been with the drum, maybe other instruments like flutes and reed instruments, simple instruments. And that's the beginning of the manifestation of what we call music. See? So it's the beginning. So we have roots in the primitive, the basic, the simple, see? The primordial, no doubt about that. So all of it is part of the shabd, or the inner sound of the universe, and that includes silence and manifest sound, or noise, see? Loud sounds, trumpet sounds, screaming sounds, all of that is human. See? So it's a different perspective, but it's complementary to what we call the Buddhas, and then you have the Huudas, who are mostly musicians. This is what I'm creating, in a sense. See, this is what I'm saying because this is how I see it. But if you stop a musician and say, hey, how are you and how's your Huuda today? You better duck. Unless they know what you're talking about, because they don't know what that is. But now it's becoming something that people can resonate with, align themselves with, and then begin to practice with in terms of what kind of music they need to be hearing into from this level of the essence of this line, musical line or rhythm. What is the essence of it? What does the silence of it speak to you as? Speaks to you to relate to it as something more than just ba-da-dee-da-dee-da-dee and so on. Yeah. Whatever it might be, right? Scale. What does it mean? What is it? See? Does it begin or end with just the sound, the audibility of it, or is there more to it? We know there's more to it, but we never follow it. We don't pursue it. See? For instance, when you have serious composers and they're trying to compose a piece and they're working from their feelings, which is, that's internal, sort of a movement of energy inside. So sadness, let's say blues, or happiness, or ecstatic bliss, or whatever it is, right? So they have to translate it, because then we're talking about the inner sounds showing up as feelings. Right? And they're not coming from nowhere. They're coming relative to your experience and what your life is about, what your moment is giving you. It could be indifferent, it could be happy, it could be sad. And it's given to you. That means it's coming from out there into you, and then it comes out through your music. It's like going back to the universe. So it's not starting with you. I mean, it appears to start with you. You're one level of origination, but then there are other levels that may be outside of you. It could be others. It could be other things. It could be the universe. Right? So this is the Huuda idea of the Hu-niverse, the Hu-niverse. Completely expressing itself in every form, right, of sound and silence. Right? And so we're not any longer limited to what is on the noted paper. See, because that is the step on the path to unfolding your intelligence to the creative level where what you read is really who you are. And you play from who you are in that moment, right, as perfectly read by your relationship to the silence of the sound. And silence will inform you what to play. And this is my proposition to the musicians. What do you hear right now apart from what you were thinking about? Yeah. Are you thinking the music, or can the music think you? Or sound, or silence?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's evident that you were playing drums from an early age. So when did this idea of Buddhism start to percolate, or be related to what you were doing with the drums?
A good question. There were times when I was a child, and in a pretty turbulent environment with drinking and all kinds of stuff going on there. Disagreements, family, Brooklyn family. And so I had to depend upon my escape from that. And that escape was using the drums as a transportation away from family conflict and so on, bad times, And so in the process of that particular escapism or voyaging into the sound field, going deeper into the sound, and that would be primarily, since I was playing congas mostly, three congas, into the beats, and then the tones. So, and then the space, when I wasn't playing but affected by the playing, then I said, what am I hearing? What am I feeling? We can say, well, that's musical inspiration. Well, we're getting closer to what the Huuda dimension is. It's what you don't hear, but you feel the presence of it, but you don't hear it yet until you play it. But it's there, it's resonance. See? It's a resonance. So we can say it's a non-music, it's a pre-music, but it can take you. And then you may be able to say, it played you. And maybe often composers, when they think they're hearing stuff in a certain way, thinking it's themselves, it may be playing you, right? It may be writing through you, see? Because it's coming from somewhere. If the guy or the woman doesn't know what it is, and when they sit down with their manuscript pen and manuscript paper, they're waiting for something, let's hope, unless they have the idea, they already intellectually know what it is, which is another way of doing it. They're not letting the ethers come and manifest through them particularly. So then we can say the Huuda, as far as my realization of it, is more part of the significance of the etheric dimension of our capabilities, which is not necessarily the ears, not necessarily the eyes. But it's definitely in the psychic field. It's more your sensing or feeling, but it may not be an emotion yet, but it's a force. It's a subtly perceived force. It's not mysterious, you just need to give it your attention in a way. If you have the vibrations for it, and you're open to it, And maybe it takes drumming to get it going in some cases, as it was in my case. It could be piano for some people, possibly. But it's not the playing itself, it's between the playing. See, it's the non-playing. And the effect of the playing, or maybe the inspiration to the playing. And so it's more in the etheric, ethereal range of reality.
So in that case, in terms of what we were just talking about, would you consider most or all musicians a channel of some sort, and then it's just a matter of...
Well, all humans are, let's say, channels or affected. They're effects of whatever the phenomena is that they're being affected by. It could be sound, it could be light, it could be situations, noise, it could be the television, it could be a number of things what we're affected by. The voices of other people, the feelings of other people. So we're affected by everything. We're in an inter-affective universe, right? Interrelationally effective. See? So it's really about everybody, but when we're talking about the Huuda, it's more specific to the etheric, not what you're channeling, or not really channeling, but what you're affected by, right? Which is not really channeling, but it could be by some people's standards. Or, you just watched a movie and then you want to go and play the music or feel what you felt there. And so I wouldn't call that channeling as such. That is being affected, so it's cause and effect there. Whereas this is questionable as to what the cause is of what it is. Whereas most people are, deliberately causing themselves to play certain things and practicing these things, and so it's not really channeling, it's more studying. Mm-hmm. Feeding oneself, what's the word, cultivating some form of music or whatever, so it's not channeling yet. So, and one can say if you are playing what you know, it's not necessarily channeling in the sense that we're talking about. Right? Because it's beyond hearing. So if it's beyond hearing, it's beyond feeling. It's more the etheric level. Excuse me.
Yeah, so then if somebody's studying but also has a spiritual practice, then what of that?
Well, even spiritual practice is not necessarily what it is, because it's something that you deliberately, excuse me, from the smoke, what you're consciously experiencing, that is, its own thing, right? It's its own thing. We're talking about going beyond what you ordinarily do and who you ordinarily are to something which is more, let's say, moving towards the spiritual, the non-material realm. So when you're hearing into silence, that's a very, very suspicious thing to refer to. So hearing it, silence is nothing. How can you hear into silence? Well, I beg to differ. So silence is plenty. And so the meditators, the Zen people say, no, it's silence. You find Buddha there in the silence. So you find Buddha in the nowhere. And you find the truth of music in the nowhere too. So Huuda is this very probing into these subtle dimensions that have nothing to do with what people think music is about, but it's probably more closer to the source of real music. That would be music that you are, but you don't know you are. Music that you may ultimately be able to compose for your let's say, career purposes, when you become a composer, let's say. And everybody knows you by that, because you're in tune with where it came from beyond your culture. So that's like an ultimate state for a lot of musicians, to be played by the music inside. Right? See, so this is mapped out in a certain way, and the books that I've written on it would carry you even more complexly into the implications of the Huuda ear of silence.
Would you consider your music the music of Huudism?
In a way, it's full of let's say, etheric potential. There's a lot of space involved in what I play. Even when I'm playing simple melodies, it's really about the creation of space, not just the sound, and bringing people into the sound, taking them outside of the sound in a certain way. Okay. And that's what I feel when I hear my music, not just the event, but I feel a certain kind of momentum, and we can call it the etheric elasticity of the sound current. And so I recommend that everybody who knows this or is willing to explore it chant Hu, like Hu, Hu, Hu. Long Hu's. Hu, and feel it immediately start to affect your eyes and your brain. Okay? Alpha wave effects. When you stop, if you do it for 10 or 15 minutes, your brain is kind of like stretched. See? And the scientists know all about the chanting science, right? And the effects of it. So it's really what you're doing to your brain. And the idea is to massage your brain with chanting or tones or sounds, and open you up to what I'm talking about relative to the etheric levels of consciousness. And it's the lingering after the chant and the elasticizing of your brain waves, whatever. Spacing out, let's call it. You may have a different feeling of what you need to play and who you are as a musician. I've spent years doing it. So I'm not saying I'm sane because of it. But certainly I'm happy to share with people relative to it. See, as a ancient, perhaps, technique, an ancient sound, like hum, hum, om mani padma, hum. Again, the exhalation, and the U sound, vibrating, all affecting the brain and producing effects. We need to know what those effects are. Not be afraid of that or sounds, because you're a musician after all. You want to be a musician, so you should know your brain. You should know the effect of sounds on your brain. It's all part of the same process. An excellent technique for attaining what has been said about ethericity or etherealization of consciousness is to chant silent hues like connected with the idea of breathing the heart's radiance, light radiance, compassionate radiance, love radiance. No self-meditation, but expansion to all beings. In that way, the yogas are similar. The more you do it, the more you enter this dimension of subtle, ethereal energy forms, right? And their effects on your brain and your creativity. See, we're talking about calming the mind, entering a certain kind of stillness, peacefulness, emptiness, free of neuroses, free of self-meditation, other problems, other meditation, and get into what heart realization is as a yogic practice. Hu.
Hu.